we highlight powerful stories from across the Pacific that inspires, uplift, and remind us of the strengths in our roots. I'm your host, Leao Sophie, coming to you live from Katy, Texas. This episode is incredibly special as we welcome back the incredible Susi Feltch-Malohifo'ou, part two of our conversation. The last time we touched base on important topics around community, family, and healing. But tonight we are diving into something deeply sensitive and often silenced in many of our communities. But before we get into the heart of a conversation, Susie, thank you for coming back on the show. It truly is an honor to have you. For those who have missed our first conversation, could you share a little bit about your background and what inspired you to start advocating for victims of domestic violence?
Sure. Susi Feltch-Malohifo'ou and co-founder of Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resources, known as PICTAR, based in Salt Lake City, Utah. We are 10 years, community-based organization. What the reason that I started the work that we do in domestic violence is I am a survivor of domestic violence, and my first experience with domestic violence was here in Salt Lake City, Utah, 30 plus years ago. And I had moved away and came back and married my husband 12 years ago. And when I came back to Utah, I thought I was healed. But what I recognized, if you anybody that's done any healing work, people, places, and things, I'd been away and I thought I was healed, but actually what I'd done had just stuffed it down. I'd ignored it. And when I came back to Utah, I recognized I needed a group support. I needed some support, culturally relevant. And I started looking and there wasn't anything in Utah. And I thought to myself, 30 years ago, I was a survivor and a victim, and nothing has happened in our community. And Utah has got one of the largest communities of Pacific Islanders in the United States. And I was really surprised that nothing had happened. So my husband started Kava Talks. That was our very first program. He wanted to start a men's group, and Kava stands for Knowledge Above Violence Always. He wanted to educate men about how America defines violence. What does that look like? Because it's very different if you were raised in the islands, um, what the definition is of that. And so he started Kava Talks and started just talking to Polynesian men about violence, sharing what the laws are around it, and um, asking the question: is it serving our community? And if it's not, what are we going to do about it? Well, we started getting calls from women, and so my husband said start a peer support group, and that's what we did. And so on Wednesday evenings at 6 p.m., we still have our women's empowerment group on Wednesday nights. And really, it's this type of thing that we're going to do tonight. It's educating. You can't heal from something that you don't understand. And so that's what got us started. And little by little, I mean, even today, I got a referral from a young lady in our community. Her abuser, she just kicked him out yesterday. But more and more, we're getting referrals um, from our community. Before, nobody wanted to talk about it.
Mm.
Nobody wanted to say anything about it. So I love the fact now that we've been doing the work long enough that people know where to reach us and trust us to share. Confidentiality is a big deal in our community, right? Nobody wants to come and tell another Polynesian because they're afraid the whole world is going to know. But we've not had any confidential breaches in the 10 years we've been doing this. I believe it's because the people that are working with victims and survivors have been victims and survivors and understand how important confidentiality is. So that's a little bit about how we got started, um, and we're still doing the work. I think we'll probably always be doing the work. There's a lot of people that are still not coming out and getting the resources and getting out of safety. I mean, getting to safety with their children.
You mentioned that there was a lady that just recently reached out to you.
Today,
Uh,
yeah,
and
yeah, I had a young lady reach out. She doesn't have any family here in Utah. She had met another Polynesian actually that we had serviced, and she referred her to us. And usually that's the way it works. If it's somebody that we've already worked with in the past, they will refer people and say, they helped me, and validate us. So they're
Hmm.
not just calling us cold call, but they feel like this is somebody that's helped somebody else in the
Hmm.
past.
So, the one thing that's very hard for people is being able to trust
Yeah,
others.
confidentiality, right?
Hmm.
Is people are always afraid to really open up and tell their story to us, or what their situation is. However, we can't help unless we know the whole story. And little by little, the story does come out. We don't have a lot of women and men that are actually, um, what's that called? Pressing charges yet. Usually, if it's pressing charges, it's because the state has picked it up and pressing charges. But us, we will call the police, but we're just not to that step yet where we're going to press charges on our abusers. And I always want to stress to people that if you don't, the abuse will continue. And it's a good way for the abuser to get the education they need so they can heal, is often they are a victim of violence as well. And so it could be a generational thing that's, maybe they had child abuse in their home and it turned into domestic violence. Maybe they saw that in their house and thought that that's the right way to treat their wife and their children. So you just never know. Every story is different.
Hmm.
But we're always grateful when people trust us and come and get services from us.
So, Susie, I know you had sent me pretty much a presentation, and it's called the Power of Control Wheel. Did you want to go over that with
Yes,
us?
let's go over that. If you can show that.
Okay.
The first step I wanted to talk about was we have to name these behaviors. And often we say the words, but do we really know what it is? And then we have to call out the violence, right? If
Hmm.
we don't name it, we can't change it. Um, and I just want to say that physical domestic violence starts way before the physical abuse starts happening. Most violence begins with control, manipulation, and strategic control. So when we look at this actual wheel was developed by real survivors' experiences. And it shows 8 ways that control is used in a relationship, especially when abuse is present. Now look at the wheel, that power and control is actually in the middle. That's the root cause, right? Some people get it mixed up that power and control, I mean, that the reason that there's domestic violence is they love the person so much or they hate the person. But at the center of domestic violence, of the center of all violence, is power and control. Um, and it can be any violence. It'll follow the same pattern. So this will helps us name what we feel, but sometimes when we can't explain what's going on, and in our culture, these behaviors are often justified as, oh, it's just being a man, or we're keeping the family together. But I want to say it's abuse. Like, let's not sugarcoat it, right? Let's say what it is. Um, and so when we look at, let's start at intimidation. At the top left hand, it says um, making her. I can't read it. Can you read what it says?
So some
Make.
words are cut off. It says making her of aid by a long something about gestures.
Okay. So what does intimidation look like? If you just had to define it or describe it, what does intimidation look like?
To me, is somebody that's bigger than physically bigger than me.
So intimidation is when somebody's yelling at you, they're
Yeah.
slamming the door, they're mean mugging you, they're standing too close to you, they're making you feel unsafe without even saying a word. The example I was thinking about when we were growing up and your mom gave you the eye, right? She could control you by that look on her face. Same thing, right? Is when your abuser or when starts yelling, it's a way to control you, to get you to shut up, to get you to stop doing something, right? And then if we look at the Pacific Island, if we look at through our own Polynesian lens, just like you said, a lot of our men are bigger than us. And so they intimidate us by standing really close, standing over you to make you feel smaller and to scare you into being quiet. So that's what intimidation is. So if we go to the next one, emotional abuse. What does emotional abuse look like?
Constant saying things to make you cry, and um, things that painful words that why would you certain words to say that, it's like, why would you say that to me,
Yeah.
you know
Name calling, right? Putting you down, gaslighting you. Um, in our Polynesian culture, it's using shame. You're not good enough. You weren't a virgin. My family has got more status than yours. You're weak. No one else is going to love you. I used to hear all these things, right? Is often when our families, start comparing land, rank, and somebody feels less than, it's a form of emotional abuse because they feel like they have to do things because they are less than. And I'm sure you've seen it, right? You've
yeah,
seen a woman that came from a very poor family and she marries somebody that has a lot of land or has a rank, and she is expected to follow suit, do whatever is told for the family because she comes from what they what they claim as lower ranked family. Does that happen in the Samoan culture?
yes. There's a lot of that. Yeah, you're not on our status, your family is so and
Yeah.
so. And I wanted to add to this is also like when you're with somebody who's very abusive, and you before the abuse start, you become very trusting of this person, right? And then you start sharing things that only you would share to your so-called best friend, which is your spouse. And so when all those things are shared, and then when the abuse starts, those things become, they're used
Weapons.
against you.
Yep. They're weapons, right?
Yeah.
And is that love, right? When your innermost secrets or your innermost feelings are shared with the man that you love so much, and yet when he gets upset, he uses those against you, may tell your family, may tell your friends, in their fit of anger. So isolation is the next one. What does isolation look like?
Isolation for me, it looks like pretty much keeping you away from those that love you, that kind of like your family,
Yeah.
other than your own direct immediate family, your parents, your siblings.
Controlling where you go, who you talk to, cutting you off from your friends and family. And in our Polynesian view, often it's you only need me. Your family is a bad influence. They're so poor. They're not really good church wise. Um, and using church to guilt someone into disconnecting. I don't know about the Samoan culture, but I know the old Tongan culture used to be when you married somebody, you went to their church. You followed the man.
Oh,
And so that often is an issue in a relationship when the wife doesn't want to have her children go to the church he's from. Versus any other thoughts of isolation, how I know in relationships that I've had that were toxic and abusive, they always try to tell me that my friends were not good people,
hmm.
and I always was because they knew that my friends would help me, and so they wanted to control and only me depend on them, right? They don't want you to have any friends, don't want you to talk to anybody because that's control.
Yeah, and I think too is that to make you feel worthless,
Yeah,
to where you feel shameful to talk to anybody
right,
because you're pretty much feeling like you're an embarrassment,
right. You're
you know.
less than, you're not valued.
Hmm.
Um, and all your value is supposed to be in him, right? He is the value, supposedly. So we'll go to the next one. It's minimizing, denying, and blaming. Now, how do you think that looks like in a relationship? Minimizing, denying, and blaming. What does that look like?
For me, it'll be like not taking accountability. You're never at fault. Like the victim is always going to be at fault.
Yeah. So minimizing, denying, and blaming can look like it wasn't that bad. You're too sensitive.
Oh yeah.
You made me do this. If you just did what I told you to do, this wouldn't have ever happened to you. And then from the Polynesian context, often I see over spiritualization, right? God will forgive me, so you should. If God will forgive me, then you should forgive me too.
Yeah, get over it.
Yeah.
Like, why are you
Um,
still dwelling on it?
yeah. That happened yesterday. What are
Yeah,
you so crying about?
right.
Or blaming like, I'm under a lot of pressure. My sister's wedding, my mom and dad want this. We don't have the money. I'm trying to figure it out. I'm stressed out. You should just leave me alone.
Hmm.
It's all your fault.
Yeah, nobody likes you. You
Yeah.
create all this.
Yeah. You're making a big deal out of this. You're the only one that it's a big deal. Nobody else cares. If you go talk to anybody else, they're going to say you're the problem, not me. Right? That's all minimizing, denying, and blaming. The next one is using children. What does it look like when an abuser uses children?
Making them go against you.
Yeah. They guilt trip you through your kids, right? If you were a good mom, our kids would get straight A's. If you were a good mom, right? The reason they're dumb is because you're dumb. Threatening to take them away. If you leave me, I'll take the kids. You don't have any money. The courts will never give you the children. You can't take care of them. That's one I've seen. The other one is using the children to spy on you, right? And having that relationship with the abuser, and then he's asking the kids, "Oh, who did mom talk to? What did you guys do today? What color was the car that man drove?" See what I mean? Using the asking your kids and using them as a weapon. They're children. They're not to be used as a weapon.
Or talking about their past to your kids
Yeah.
to make them look at your mother like she's not a good person. She's not what you think she is.
Well, and I've seen a lot of relationships. I see if it wasn't for me, your mom would have married or not been married, and they're so poor, and no one wanted your mom. Your mom is dumb, and really in devaluizes you, and then your children start to devalue because he's treating you that way. Then your children start to believe that it's okay. We can treat mom like that because dad treats mom like that, and she becomes the dumb one. Oh, your mom is so dumb, she doesn't know how to do anything. The house is always a mess because your mom's lazy. All of those kinds of things. So that's using children. The next one is um, using economic abuse or male privilege. Those kind of go hand in hand. What does it look like when men use their male privilege. What does that sound like and what does it look like at home?
So I kind of feel like in church, kind of, right? Like the status, like this is my calling. This is, you should be listening to me. And whatever
I
I
have
say
the
should,
priesthood.
yeah.
I have the priesthood. I am the leader of this house. I am the king of this house. And I make all the decisions. You just follow. You're the wife. Um, I'm the one that makes all the decisions here. And I think in the Polynesian context or perspective, it is twisting cultural leadership roles into domination instead of service. And when we talk, I mean, let's think about that, twisting cultural leadership roles into domination instead of service. And the first example that I have that comes to mind is two. My family is having this, you have to do this. You have to cook. You have to make this, and it better be right. So, what should have been service then becomes a domination of that you must do it this way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I could see the using the status to take
Yeah.
control.
What would be an example that comes to mind when you say status? Would that be church status or would that be community status?
I, I feel like both, and also dealing when with community. I feel like you have other people on the outside that is saying stuff like, "How do you let your wife talk to you like that, or run the family that way?" You know.
I'm sorry. What did you
So
just say?
I kind of feel like it's also on the community side when you have like a influence on the outside
Yeah.
telling like your spouse stuff like, why do you let your wife do this? Why is she taking control of so and so? That's your job. Or why do you let her talk to you that way? It's
Yeah.
so the influence on the outside can also push a person to be a certain way to you.
Yeah. That peer pressure, right?
Yeah.
Like why do you let your wife tell you what to do? Oh, your wife now she wears the pants in your house.
hmm
Um,
we have one that's a comment on here. It says, from Julia, how's it, fam? Hey, Julia. And she said, toxic masculinity is real, and if present in a family unit, it'll damage spirit and togetherness.
for sure. It sure will. Um, the other thought I had about how sometimes those cultural leadership, I don't know about in Samoan culture, but like, the oldest boy in a family, he has a lot of responsibility. And if you're the wife of the firstborn, um, you know, your job is to support him. And, like I know I do it because it's the right thing for me to do and I want to do it.
Mm.
But if a husband tried to tell me I must do it, I probably wouldn't do it. You know what I mean? That's how it becomes, it turns from service to domination because we are forced to do something. And then probably if we were left to make up our own mind, we would have just done it because we are the type of women that we are. We know our responsibilities. We know that whatever the family thing is, if you're married to the oldest or whatever the responsibility is, um, we would do it. But when somebody tries to force you to do something, then it's a problem.
Yeah.
So the next one is economic abuse. What does it look like? What does economic abuse look like?
I feel that has to do with a lot of the financial part of things, money wise, um, dealing with, well, pretty much for me, it just deals with your living situation, your surroundings, your financial
Yeah, I mean,
status.
I mean, taking money, right?
Yeah.
um, Refusing to let his wife or his partner work. And this goes both ways. I mean, I've seen women also too that are abusers to their husbands. Um, and I've also seen where I had one case where a husband had passed away and the wife had no idea about banking, no idea where anything went because he paid all the bills. She never touched money. I said to her, "How about grocery?" She said, "Oh, he went with me to go buy groceries and he paid for them." I said, "How about gas in your car?" "No, he put all the gas in my car." She literally never touched money.
Did she
How?
allow, did she accept it? I mean, obviously she accepted it, but was that a choice?
No, it wasn't a choice. It just is how it was in her relationship. But that's sometimes we do things out of love for our spouses. We can't see that it is economic abuse when you're not touching money, when you can't say I want to go get my nails done, or you have to account for every single dollar, right? Or your money. I mean, I've seen relationships where your money was his money. You got your paycheck and just gave it to them.
So you're saying it's an economic abuse, even though she didn't agree or agreed, she allowed it to happen.
Yeah, yeah. And just like we talked about, is when you first get into a relationship and it's toxic, you don't even see those changes coming. We wanting to make our partner happy, and so we tend to change ourselves to the point that we then don't even know who we are because we've changed ourselves so much to meet the needs of the person we love so much. They could tell us anything, and it may, in our right mind, we would say that's not right. But because we love them, we're like, oh, okay. And we coupled with the, you're not smart. Why would you even, I didn't ask you for your opinion. You don't work. You don't make as much money as I do. This is what we're going to do. And you're going to like it. So then, if you feel like you can't say anything, you can't leave the relationship, you are going to just put up with it. Yeah, but I literally worked with a woman who had never touched money. He filled up her car, paid all the groceries. Um, he didn't let her touch money at all. Didn't even let her work.
Oh, I was going to ask, does she even work? But
No.
wow.
Um, the next one is coercion and threats. What does coercion and threats look like? I'll give you some examples here. If you leave me, I'm gonna kill myself. I'm gonna have you deported. You don't have papers. So you don't have any, you can't say anything, you can't go to the police because if you go to the police and report, they're gonna deport you. I'm gonna hit you, or I'm gonna lock you out of the house and you won't be able to see the kids. Or I'm gonna keep the kids in the other part of the house and you can't touch them and you can't see them. So that's what any of those threats that people I remember one of my husbands, he said
Sorry.
he was going to take a knife and cut my face. He wasn't going to kill me. He was just going to cut my face up so that when I looked in the mirror every morning, I would remember him. That was his threat. And then if we look at the Polynesian context of this, if you leave, it's going to ruin your reputation. No one's going to have you because you got how many kids and been married, you're used up. No one's ever going to want you. I'm going to tell the bishop everything, all your secrets. I'm going to tell. Any other these contact these things that you've seen in the community or you've heard? Those are the
I
only
think
two that I could think of that were kind of Polynesian centered things.
the reputation, the image, try
Yeah.
not to. Um, and I think too with kids, it's like trying to keep things you know, under cover so that it doesn't erupt as much as it's already erupt, but it's just more of trying to hide things so that, you could pretend life is normal so that your
Well, and
kids,
weakness, right? We don't ever want anyone to think we're weak,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
We
pretty
don't
much.
we want to make it seem like everything is perfect, our life is perfect, everything is going fine. But when we do that, it is to the advantage of the abuser, right? If when we continue that charade of the perfect lifestyle, and we often put on ourselves, I'm a bad wife, I'm a bad mother, this wouldn't be happening if I was a better mom, if I was a better person, he's right, I'm a bad person. And he continually says that to us, enough times of saying that to us, then we start believing it. And then we turn inwards and say, what's wrong with me? I just need to do what he's telling me to do. I want to keep peace. I'm tired of fighting. I don't want the kids to know that there's a problem. How would I take care of these children if I leave him? So
And,
it preys on our own psyche as
and,
well.
and um, it's really hard to, like, especially in the Samoan community. And this is just my opinion. I'm sure everybody else has their own, you know, and I feel like a lot of things too, like there's people talk a lot. And so it's really hard. Like you could do so much good and you could do so much for others. But when stuff like this happens, is that they tend to look at you and laugh and then they start mocking you and they start talking. And so that part start comes in with the isolation. It keeps you away from, and then you start putting yourself in a different direction to where you don't want to be around that group anymore because you don't want to be mocked at or looked at in a different way because that could really ruin a person's self-esteem.
I mean, I think I always just tell people we have to be what we want to see in the community. It starts with us, right? If we don't like that part of our community, then we need to be that person that doesn't do that anymore. Be that voice in that group of women to say, why are you saying that about her? You know what I mean? It is hard. But I always say if we don't like things in our community, we must stand up. And when somebody starts saying, "Oh, did you hear they're having problems?" Yes, I did hear they're having problems. How can we help her? How can we be supportive of her? What is it that we can do? Can we go over and clean her house? Can we go take her out to lunch? Right?
Well,
Instead of jumping in on the bandwagon and being so negative and hurtful.
and it's also even sad too is that you would have to, they would go to the person, the abuser, and hey, I heard so and so and so. I was like, do you know what that does to?
Yeah, you know what's about to happen? Yeah. Yep. And I think that's why it's so important that we learn about these things in church, in our community, in our families, so that we're educated about it. We can see the signs. What, the young lady that we got a referral today, it's because a young lady that we had serviced, she saw the signs in somebody else. And then she said it was another she said there was another Polynesian young lady around her age, so she went and said hi, and she said she could tell just by talking to her. And then the young lady, she said, kind of opened up to her, and so she said, "Oh, I was in a domestic violence relationship, and there's an organization. You can call my friend Susie. Here's her number, and I'm gonna text her. And if it's okay, can she call you?" She texted me. She said, "Susie, I met this lady. I think she's in a domestic violence and she's by herself. Could you reach out to her?" And I told her you'd be calling. So I reached out to her. I left a message. You never know if people are going to call you back. Um, and I am going to share with you the message that she gave me, sent me back because I sent her, called her, left her a message, and I texted her and said, "I'm here if you need any help. We've got resources for you. Our group is on Wednesday night." Um, and I'm trying to find her. She says to me, um, "I didn't realize that we had text so much today." Yeah, so her comment said, "Hi, Susie. I'm so sorry I'm still at the event. I really appreciate all the love and everything I've been shown by everyone from the group here at the event. It's been hard these past few months and even years, but these months have been really tough. But I thank you and I will call you." Like when even if you're a perfect stranger, I don't know her, but just those kind words, right, will lift you when you are feeling so down and out. It's just to hear a kind voice, that's not judgmental, that's not going to shame you, not to guilt you. It is refreshing when you are are in that situation. So I was just going to say those things that we were talking about, those behaviors on the wheel. I'm just going to say it. I know you probably, those that are listening, is it's not love. That is not love at all. Those behaviors, if that's happening, it's not love. It is it's about their control. And our ancestors didn't raise us to harm one another, right? They did not teach us to harm each other. So we have to decolonize this toxic masculinity and redefine what strength looks like to us. Um, I always say this: control is not culture. And I know in our Pacific Island, a lot of people may feel like that we're violent, that we're controlling. But control is not culture. Love should feel safe, not scared. If you feel scared in a relationship, in any, whether it's mother, child, work, boyfriend, sister, if at any time you feel scared, it's not safe. And warriors protect, they don't dominate. And I think those are some of the things that we need to remember, that culture is not control. I mean, we've got about 20 minutes. Do you want to go ahead and hit the control,
Yeah,
the
let's.
the violence cycle? Do you want to put that one
Okay.
up?
Yeah, let me do that right now.
So we're going to talk about what happens after this wheel starts to turn, right? We've just gone through these 8 things. So we've just gone through this power and control. Now what happens is the cycle of violence starts turning. And because recognizing the behavior is just the first step, but how do we stop that cycle? And that's where the healing begins, is when we stop that cycle. Um, so we just broke down power and control and those everyday actions that are meant to, and that's what we just did. And those were meant to break people down. Those 8 behaviors we just talked about were made to break people down without ever throwing a punch, right? They've not even touched you, but they've used all of these ways to manipulate you. So now we're going to talk about those behaviors, um, because they don't just happen. There is a cycle to this, and the cycle traps too many of us because we don't see it coming. And so the cycle, let's start with the first one: tension, right? Tension starts to happen. The abuser gets moody, the silent treatment, lots of critical. Dinner didn't taste good. You're getting fat. The kids are not good. They follow you. Um, the tension starts to build, and things start getting demanding. Now the victim during this period tries to calm things down. They maybe stop talking. Um, they stop going out. They basically are walking on eggshells, not, they're trying to keep things at peace at home. Any other thing around tension building and walking on eggshells that you want to add to that?
Um, just feeling more of the burden of doing too much and not having any help to do anything.
Yeah. And then if you said anything to your partner, it's, I mean, I've heard this. My mom worked two jobs and was able to raise four kids, and you don't even work and you can't take care of all of that. So when we look at Polynesian context, you feel it in the air, right? You know. I used to think to myself, I'm gonna get hit by the weekend. I already knew that it was coming, right? The kids go quiet, the house shifts, you walk on eggshells. And often the control is um, looks like discipline or stress. Like you just said, there's no help, right? It stresses you out. So it may look like discipline and stress, but underneath it is actually control there. So then we've got to the tension building. Then the next step is there's an explosion. There's something happens. There's a verbal fight. There's an emotional, or there's a physical abuse that happens. It's yelling, slapping, raping, choking, some some kind of destruction. A fist goes to a wall. Some kind of action because you've been walking on eggshells. The tension is building, and then there's an explosion. And then in our homes, we cover it up. Don't tell anybody. You tell your kids that's between mom and dad. So pain served with silence here. Usually we try the victim will try to calm the batterer down, cook all their favorite food, have sex with them as many times as they want. Um, don't say anything back. If they get mad because you cry, you don't cry. If you whatever it is that you think is going to stop them, then we have the explosion. Then we get to the honeymoon phase.
Yeah.
Apologize is coming. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. I love you so much. Gifts, flowers, lots of promises, a lot of pressure to forgive. The bishop tells you to pray it away. He's a good man.
That is true.
And then the victim starts to say to themselves, maybe he did mean it. Maybe I overreacted. This is my fault. But that honeymoon stage is fake peace. It's just manipulation to cover it up. And then we go right back to the tension building. You see how that goes, that cycle? Then you go right back to the tension. There's an explosion. Then we get honeymoon stage. I know for myself, there were times when I said, I wish it would just hit me so we can get to the honeymoon stage. Because I wanted that honeymoon stage to last forever, right? Because that was the piece that I thought was happiness. I thought that's what a marriage is supposed to be like. But the truth is, that's fake peace there. And we're going to
Wow.
enjoy it.
Sorry, you actually felt like you wanted him to hit you already so you could get to the honeymoon
Yeah.
phase? Wow.
Yeah. I've been in relationships where I'd like, just hit me. Because I know once he hits me, he's going to feel sorry. And then he's going to be really nice. I didn't even know this though. I was just, that was what I was thinking in my own head until I started to get educated on what this cycle looks like. And many of us that have been in this cycle, I remember saying, I just want off this roller coaster. It just is going round and round. I'm not getting anywhere here. And if you've experienced domestic violence or you've been around people of any kind of violence, I think you will see this is the cycle. In a really honeymoon stage, then you have the tension. You start walking on eggshells. Then you have the explosion. Then you're right back in the honeymoon stage, and you just keep going round and round and round. Does this make sense?
Yeah, and it's not going to happen in seconds. It'll probably take a course of, it just depends.
Yeah. It can go in a week, it can go in a day, or it could be in months, right? But
Yeah.
I know for me, I was really, really hoping that the honeymoon stage would last longer. But then when I started feeling like, when I could tell he was getting moody, he was starting to nitpick at me. Um, he started putting me down, yelling, out drinking more, starting to threaten me, destroy things, criticizing. The other thing too was some of my abusers would make me think I was crazy, like I was losing my brain, my mind. Yeah, so the the core of this cycle is denial. Everyone pretends it didn't happen. The abuser minimizes, the victim justifies, and the family says we don't talk about it. And in our community, it's almost thought as silence is survival, but it's what keeps us broken. The silence is what keeps us broken. So that cultural lie that says protecting reputation matters more than protecting people is a lie. It's not about protecting our reputation. It's about protecting ourselves and our families. People are more important than reputation. And it matters because this cycle keeps repeating itself until someone gets really hurt or unless someone decides they want off that merry-go-round and stop going through those cycles. The other thing that that cycle does, it teaches children that that is the correct behavior, and it's not the correct behavior. That cycle also becomes generational. If we don't call it out, if we don't fix it in our generation, we automatically pass it down. It goes to the next generation. If we don't heal from it, the next generation will have to heal from it and pass it down.
So
So when we're breaking this, go ahead.
so what you're saying is that the reason why the abuser is the way that they are is because it happened. They saw that happen to in front of them. I mean, they grew up seeing that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, when kids see that, they think it's normal. What we saw growing up, we thought was normal until we get older and we see that other families didn't do that. Think about your own upbringing, what you did in your house until you got out and other around other people and saw that they didn't live in the same way.
Mhm.
So you are going to, I hear many abusers, the Polynesian abusers that I work with, they say, "Oh, our dad did that. I thought that's what you did. That's how he handled my mom." So you're teaching your kids how to live by example. What is that saying? Kids will learn by what you do, not by what you say.
Yeah, I agree with that. But at some point, they must have seen, they must, at some point when they got older, we're talking about like um, of age, they start to notice that this wasn't right.
Right.
And so, do you?
They start talking to their friends and
Mhm.
then they find out, "Oh, your dad didn't hit your mom?" "Oh, I didn't know that. I thought that was what happened."
Mm.
So we have to learn by to break these cycles, we have to say abuse, not misunderstanding. We have to call it as it is. Can't sugarcoat it. We have to choose safety over shame. No title, no role, no culture justifies abuse. Abuse is abuse.
Well,
We have to stop excusing behavior as stress or alcohol or culture. We have to stop
we
making excuses.
so I just wanted to ask about in the Tongan community. There's a lot of kava clubs, right? When we talk about there are we need to talk about this, we need to do certain things so that we can recognize that this is not good. And do you think that the kava clubs that these men go to or women go to is a way for them to relieve tension and stress? Is that a good habit, or what are ways that we can help and educate our Polynesian people so that they can learn that this is not right? There are other avenues that you can use, like for example, therapy or you know,
I mean,
going to church.
it starts with just the people you know in your network, your family, your children. Have the
Mhm.
conversation. Have that conversation. It starts there. In your own little network. Educate there. Teach them. Show them the power and control wheel. Have conversations about these behavioral things.
When you're saying talking about have a conversation, what conversation are we talking about? Amongst just the couple or the family, as the
Everybody. Anybody.
mom, dad, and the kids?
Yeah. I mean, you can say, hey, I had this person on my podcast and this is what they shared. What do you think about that?
Mm.
It can be, we have to start talking about it. And it can be as simple as just having a conversation with your sister, a conversation with your parents, conversation with your children. Start there. That's what I tell people. Start in your own four walls, start in your own network. I know some of the women that I've worked with, they've set up a text thread amongst the females in their family. And they use that as a way to educate and to ask questions. And um, I would start there um, on a individual basis. I mean, if you in leadership and award or something, we've done lots of training. Is say we want to do training for our youth, or we want to do some training, and let your bishop know um, that you want education on this. Those are kind of the two things that come to mind of what can we do in our community. We need to open our mouths and just have conversations about it. The other thing I'm thinking about is centering the victim, not the abuser. No more, he's a good guy, but when he gets angry, he's not. That's minimizing his behavior. So I think just modeling something better and to remember that our kids are watching. We have to model something better than than maybe what we grew up with or what we saw in our communities, in our villages at home, in our islands. Um, and if people are caught in this cycle, I just want to say it's not your fault. You are not broken. You do not need to keep proving your worth every day over and over. You deserve to be loved and to feel safe every day, not just when they're in a good mood. You know, our ancestors crossed the oceans. You can cross this storm and you don't have to do it alone. You can always reach out to me for resources, um, talk to your friend. But I think the biggest thing is we need to just open our mouths and just talk to each other
I,
about
I
this.
like I like what you mentioned. You have some women who have a group thread where they text each other.
Yeah.
I that's like for more of a support, right?
Support and education.
Hmm.
I mean, you can do the education of what we just talked about tonight in that text or like, hey, I was on this podcast or I heard this podcast and this is what the takeaway is for me.
Hmm.
So if you had to share our conversation tonight, what are the takeaways that you're taking away from this conversation? What
For
have you learned
me, just
for
going
your
well,
aha?
one of the things that I took away from was, recognizing the cycle. understanding what each of them mean, because we could say what it is, but we just don't know. We don't really know the details that come with that, right? But we do know what it is. Um, and then recognizing that it is wrong, um, and it's not going to break unless we recognize these patterns and do something about it.
Yeah,
But
it will
Susie,
never heal.
yeah, I don't
And
think
shame and
so.
guilt lives in silence.
Yeah.
Healing lives in communication and talking and sharing.
But when is enough enough? And do you think that a person will ever change? Um, I'm sure they will. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that change that were very abusive. But do you think that those who are going through that would be able to change right now?
I believe anybody can change. I believe that anybody can change. They have to work at it.
Julia says, set boundaries, value peace, prioritize joy in life and purpose.
Yep. I believe that everybody can change. But just because I believe that an abuser can change doesn't mean that I am going to. I mean, we're not hospitals for abusive men. You don't have to stay in it. They can go and get their own help. They're adults. They're responsible for their own. We aren't responsible for them. They are responsible for themselves. If they truly want help, they will find therapy. They will figure out the changes they need to make if they're truly about change. We don't need to call the therapist for them. We don't need to do that's all on them,
That is true.
right? We are not a hospital for abuse. I used to think, "Oh, he said he can't do this without my help. I'm going to be the helper." And the whole time I'm still getting abused while he's trying to get help? No. Why would I even now I look back and say, why would I even let that happen? Because I didn't value myself. I wanted to be the helper. And
Healing is an individual effort.
yes, everybody heals differently. What works for me may not work for the next. I do
I
see a lot of women staying in their relationship because they want to help them get better, but really they should focus on themselves and get themselves better.
I think I think too, they stay in a relationship because they're afraid of change, afraid of being alone. And you mentioned some of the things that they would use, um, by saying that you'll never find anybody. You can never do good without me.
You're
And
fat, you're ugly,
you're ugly.
you're no
Nobody
good.
wants a woman with many kids, or
Yeah.
just things that stay in a person's mind that makes them just say, well, I guess this is it and I have to deal with this with my life.
But we always have an option. And I think that's what happens is we think we're stuck, but we there's always an option. And I often say to people, choose your heart. It's hard to stay in a relationship that's toxic. It's hard to leave and not know what the future is going to bring you. Often people stay in domestic violence and toxic relations because they actually know what's going to happen. That cycle, right? They
Mhm.
already know that's the cycle that it takes. And even though they don't like it, they know getting healing and moving out of that in the unknown, it's hard too. So I always say to people, choose your heart. When you're ready to make that move, you'll know. People used to say that to me a lot when I'd been in abusive relationships. They would say, well, when you're tired of it, you'll do something about it. And until you're tired of it, you won't do anything about it.
Mm, that's true. But Susie, is there you have the program called Kava Talks. And that is based in Utah. Is that something that can be used on Zoom for those who are in need of that help?
So during COVID, it was all on Zoom. We just barely went back to in person, but it's always yes. So we do Zoom. If need, it loses some. I don't know. It's weird. It's a very different group online versus in person.
What do
When
you
we did
mean?
it online, we had Polynesian men come from across the world
Hmm.
to talk about um, domestic violence, to talk about abuse, um, and to get support and to support each other, the men. Now we do our community um, Kava Talks on Thursday nights, and yes, we can put that on Zoom. And we do the prison as well. So we do a weekly prison Kava Talks in the Utah State Prison. We see the women once a week, and we see the men once a week, and then we do community. So on Wednesday night is our women's empowerment group. We could do Zoom there. We use Google Meets, and then we can do the same um, on Thursday nights with Kava Talks.
I feel like that's a good resource for many of our Polynesian people because I know I was talking to my sister that they have one in Samoa, American Samoa, and I'm not sure about other places. I'm sure there are, but it'll be nice for those resources to be out there because I feel like there are many women who are hiding out there um, that's showing face, but are going through the situation right now
Right.
and are having a hard time because of the said things that you talked about just tonight.
The other thing is we have for the women, we have our online private women's empowerment group. And I think I added you to it,
Hmm.
but that is a place too that people are coming there for support. Sometimes it's just a hard day, and just posting there and getting the support. There's probably like 250 women from all over. They started out, it used to be that you had to come to group in order to be in the private group, but that we were starting to service women outside of Utah that couldn't come to groups. So we started allowing other women to join so that they had a place where they could decompress, share. Um, and so we always, that's another avenue that we utilize. That if you put something on there 24/7, somebody's going to answer you.
Mm. Susie, what can you say to those who are just starting in a relationship? To what can they recognize in an abusive person, so that they can, get away? Because I feel like, and I tell my kids, be careful. Try not to. It's not your place to deal with a project. So, what do you say to those who are starting in with a new relationship?
So, like red flags, huh?
Yep.
Red flags in a relationship. I probably have a list here that I wrote down. Let me see. Red flags in a relationship. Um, One of the things that I know is that if you're dating somebody that's got to be on the phone with you all the time, that's calling you nonstop, I used to think, wow, he really loves me. He wants to talk to me all of the time. That is a red flag. That's control. One of my husbands, he used to call me, and if I didn't answer the phone, he would just straight keep calling, calling, calling. And by the time I answered it, he'd worked himself into a frenzy. When I call, I need you to pick up the phone.
But some people will look at it as, oh my gosh, this person cares about me,
Yes,
loves me.
yes. Love bombing, right?
Yep.
So if somebody, you meet them for the first night, the first time, and they tell you right away they love you, then how could they love you? They don't even know you, right? So somebody that's trying to love bomb you, um, which means that it's a big red flag because they're trying to um, connect with you on a much deeper emotional level too quickly, right? To get into relationship.
Yeah.
So that's a sign of emotional manipulation, that they feel like they're filling a hole in your life. I mean, the other thing is trauma bonding, not just love bombing, but trauma bonding. Sharing your issues with somebody else and they've got the same issues or similar issues, and your whole relationship is based on discussing that. So that's called trauma bonding.
Wait. You said what you just mentioned was when you're in that relationship and you're talking about your issues.
Right. So let's just say that you meet somebody and they tell you, "Oh, I was my mom and dad abused me. They beat me as a child." And then the other person says, "Oh yeah, I also too was like that." Then it starts to become you're bonding, not in love. You're bonding through your trauma.
Mm, just to keep you connected.
I mean, a lot of people, I think they don't even recognize it. And if you hear people say, "Oh, we have so much in common," and you ask them what's in common, we were both abused. Is that what a relationship should be built on?
Mm, I see
Right?
what you're saying. Yeah.
That's trauma bonding. I think another red flag is if they're not polite, if they're not appreciative, if they don't remember your birthday, the little things. They go and get a drink for them, but they don't bring you anything. They don't offer, would I'm going to Jack in the Box, I'm getting some food. Would you like a drink? But just politeness, right?
Yeah.
They don't compliment you.
But on the flip side, there are those who will compliment you, and there are those who would charm their way around you,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
That's
how do you
so
know the
that's that
difference?
that's the love bombing that I was talking about.
Ah, got it.
If somebody is trying to connect way too early with all of this stuff, that is a red flag.
Mm. We have a comment on here. That's a good point. Hurt people.
Hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've seen that comment before. I think I want to say I don't know that that's true all of the time.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, I believe when I heard that first in my life, hurt people, I thought I took that as abusive people, like I've been abused and he hurt me, that I'm going to turn around and I'm going to punch somebody too, or I'm going to be abusive to somebody. And I was like, no, I would never do that to anybody. I wouldn't beat my children. I wouldn't go out and just because somebody hurt me. That was how I was um understanding that. And so I didn't really agree. But now what I believe is it's not a physical hurt. Hurt people, because if you have not worked through your trauma, you are going to hurt people. And it doesn't have to be physical. Whereas when I first heard it, I thought it meant physical. So the way I was understanding it, when I first heard that quote, it was like I was abused, I was beat up physically. That means I'm going to go out and beat up somebody else,
Okay.
right? But that's not today. That's not what I understand that as. And I do agree that hurt people, not necessarily physically though. Is until we've worked through our trauma, we are going to hurt people that are around us unintentionally. And why working through the trauma is so important, because we have been hurt. One of those other red flags that I just thought about is boundaries. If they keep crossing your boundaries, that's a huge red flag to me, because we put those boundaries down to protect us, because that's something that we said, this is a boundary I'm going to put down. And if that person respected you, they're going to stay away from that boundary. But if they keep breaking that boundary and crossing your boundary, I think that that is a red flag. Do you have do you have a boundary that you can think of? We could use it as an example, or if somebody's listening and you have a boundary that you have placed that we could use it as an example.
Um, I say, could this be one? Don't ever use my family. Don't use my family as an excuse.
Yep, that could be one.
Just in an argument, going back trying to hurt me by using my own parents.
Hmm. So
Um,
not talking badly about your family.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a boundary. I mean, that's the other thing too for me. I mean, not you should if they're going to talk bad about my family or my friends, I'm that's a deal breaker for me. Um, a boundary for me is also is name calling. I'm not okay with name calling.
But in an argument, it just comes out.
Unacceptable for me.
Mm.
You have to learn to fight fair. I don't call people names even when I'm mad. I don't say that, and I
But the
don't allow
abuser will use names, though.
huh?
But the abuser will use name calling.
Yeah, but if you put that boundary down, whether you're in a fight or you're not in a fight, that's that slippery slope on the boundary.
Got it.
You're gonna allow that boundary to be broken when you're fighting, but when you're not fighting, then the boundary is in place and intact. You can't let a slippery slope happen on a boundary. If that person is going to cross that boundary over and over and over, what that says to me is they don't respect you. I'll give you a boundary that we probably all thought about or think about. The boundary of having premarital sex,
That is true.
right? That's a boundary that we have been taught. That is a boundary we teach our children. But um, somebody just put when an in-law lashes out and projecting frustration or pain and unwillingness to correct behavior or show big accountability. Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, again, we all have our own boundaries, and what I probably have very tight boundaries
Hmm.
in many situations where I've been with my life experiences and abuse. But for me, that statement right there, hey, I'm not letting my in-laws say anything about me. That's unacceptable for me. I would never talk badly. I may talk badly about my in-laws to my husband, but I'm not going to say things out in public or about my in-laws. I mean, I'm a firm believer if you have a problem with somebody, the last thing you should do is go around talking about them. Just go talk to them directly about it.
Right. But then it becomes an issue when your spouse allows it to happen.
Yeah.
And that's where the boundary comes in, right?
Yep. Yep.
That's a good one, though. Because, with the Polynesian community, I know, like, in the Samoan, like, family is a big thing.
It is.
And so even with the in-laws, they do get, I feel like in the beginning of the marriage, they do somewhat get involved, if you allow it to.
If I was just gonna say only if you allow it,
Yes.
only if the spot. And I always feel like we should each handle our own families. If my
Yes.
family has an issue, they need to deal with me about it. If his family has an issue or something that they need to talk to him about it.
Hmm.
And then we can talk about it together and decide what we're going to do.
I agree. I agree.
I'm trying to think of any other lack of communication. If they can't communicate and they want to play the guessing game, like they're going to pout and you don't know that they're mad about something, they have to be able to communicate.
Oh gosh. Yes.
If they're
Uh,
just going to continue to shut down every time that a problem comes up.
that's the other thing too, is like there is no communication. Where maybe it's across the board with everybody.
I mean, Pacific Island culture doesn't teach communication. Think about when you're a child. You're not allowed, it's disrespectful to say something to your parents
Yes,
or to disagree or not even disagree, to have a conversation. You try to have a conversation and that's considered disrespectful. So if you don't learn how to communicate as a child, you grow up to be an adult that doesn't know how to communicate.
yes, that is true. I totally believe in that because I didn't realize the importance of learning how to talk and doing all these speeches until I got out of the islands and went to college. So yes,
Yeah, it's a
and it carried on to my marriage too. So
yes, it translates to it translates to work. When you
yes,
can't have a conversation with your coworkers or you just get mad because something happened at work and we don't have the words to be able to have a tough conversation with somebody to say, you really hurt my feelings. I did not appreciate what you just did. Because we're quick to the fist. Easier for us to slap somebody than it is to sit down and have that kind of conversation.
correct.
But we can't go around slapping people.
Hmm.
We have to face the communication. We have to learn how to verbalize to be able to, and this goes for our children, for our spouses, to say, spouse, I do not like how you just spoke to me. It made me feel blah, blah, blah. As long as you use I statements, right? I feel this. No one can fault you.
And this is so important, especially with our youth, that this conversation needs to be had because, I grew up not knowing these things. I grew up not knowing the red flags. I grew up thinking that this is, honestly, I felt like, well, God is punishing me because of the choices I made in my past. And so I have to deal with this. So it's stuff like that that plays with my mind, right? It's just a lot of things that I didn't realize till I went through experience and learned on my own. And I feel
Yes.
like the youth, especially our Polynesian, we need to, within our home, talk about it in home or talk about it at school.
I mean, use family home evening as a way
Yep.
to have play communication games. Give people. We do this in our support groups. Emotional intelligence that involves talking feelings is not normalized. Amen to that. I mean, we got
Yep.
emotional intelligence that we don't do, and talking about feelings. Talking and feelings are not normalized because often that's looked like is weak in our culture. To say you hurt my feelings. I mean, my mom didn't even speak English. If I said to her, "You hurt my feelings," she'd be like, "What?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Shut up!"
Or
Right?
even if you were to translate that in Tongan, right, to her, um, she would look at you like, get over it. What is,
Yeah, get over it. Suck it up.
yeah.
What's wrong with you? Are you weak?
Mhm.
I mean, and then try to say, "Oh, I'm sensitive." Go ahead, sensitive. They would even know. What are you talking about? Sensitive.
I know our generation, we didn't have to, we were one to not speak up. We were one to just hold it all in and deal with it.
Correct. So think about what happens when the. I think this happens to our males. They get hit at home. They cannot explain. They cannot verbalize, and they leave the house. And the first person that looks at them cross-eyed, they're gonna get punched in the face.
Hmm.
Right? Had
Yep.
nothing to do with that person. It's because they didn't have an outlet to be able to express what they were, the hurt that they were feeling inside.
Mm. And so when they have a wife or a spouse or partner that comes with all these emotion, they don't know how to deal with that because just like how they internalize their feelings, they expect you to do the same thing.
Correct. Yeah. So you can see what happens in one generation affects the next generation. If you don't correct it in your generation, you are passing that on to your children.
That is true.
And then your children have to learn, and they either face it, work through it, or they continue to pass it on to the next generation.
Or they don't talk to you about how they truly feel because they grew up watching all of that. And they suck it up just like what you said, and then they carry it on to the next generation.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would say another red flag that I can think of is their unwillingness to compromise. It has to be their way always.
Yeah.
They can't compromise. They're stubborn, selfish. They feel like it's a win or a lose. If I compromise, that means I'm weak. I I'm the man though.
And again, I wanted to add that some men will accept that part, right, of their spouse taking that control, but it's the influence on the outside that puts that pressure on them to say, hey, why are you letting this person do that? You're supposed to be the man. You're supposed to do this. You don't look like you're the man of the family.
Yeah, and that validation from outside, right?
Yeah.
Validation should be coming from within. But if validation is coming from outside of that person, they have to deal with, I mean, they have to fix that. They have to recognize that it's not good for them to even try to change it.
That is true. Yeah.
I think another red flag is if you're always getting put down,
Yeah.
right? And you're just dating and they're already and you know some of us may laugh about it. I probably when I was a teenager I would laugh out like oh ha, ha, ha,
Yeah. Sorry.
right?
Yep.
When I was a teenager it'd probably be like oh hi and then he said he said I was ugly. He said I was fat. And it'd be like oh he loves me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't think we should give people a pass in in allowing again we're going back to those behaviors the nine the alienation
Yep.
thinking about that power and control wheel any of those things that are on that power and control wheel are red flags.
It's funny in the beginning, as you say, was they're laughing about it until they become married or, committed to each other. It becomes too much.
Yeah, I mean it I always say it doesn't get any better when you're dating
Yeah,
after that. That's the best, right? Because they're supposed to be on their best behavior and you're supposed to be on your best behavior,
that is correct.
so it doesn't get any better than that.
So, do you
So it
think telling your daughters, right? Would you say to them, um, to know of a good man, check the way he takes talks to his mom, how he acts with his family? Do you think that's a good advice to tell them?
I mean, you can tell them all you want, but what are they seeing in their house?
That, yep, yeah, that's correct.
Because that's what they're going to think is okay, appropriate behavior. So if you're going to have the conversation of, it's not like your dad, or see how your dad, he's a fair, he's an honest person. He works really hard for the family. Because you don't even need to say or give advice when that's the example that they're seeing in their home. That will carry further with them than the words you speak.
Okay.
And I think it's why it's so important. You know, I'm not saying marriages should be perfect or they're not going to be perfect, but being a parent is hard. There's no book on how to do in how to be a parent, and you're dealing with your relationship with your spouse that are both trying to deal with relationships with their children, trying to work, keep a roof over your head.
Hmm.
It's hard.
dealing with the emotional battles of all
Yeah,
sides. Yeah.
yeah, it's hard. Um, as I'm looking at my list here that I wrote for red flags, excessive lying and jealousy,
Yes. The jealousy part in the line.
lack of trust,
Mm.
accountable. Are they going to do what they say they're going to do?
Mm. Here's a comment. I've known many a man who treated their moms and sisters with all the respect in the world and still beat their wives mercilessly. Sorry, I couldn't say that.
Yes. And that's why I'm saying there is no one right
That's
answer for every
sad.
situation, right? We're responsible for our relationships and they're going to be different. But I think being able to recognize abuse and calling it as it is so that you can get to safety, so your children can get to safety.
It's I know women are saying, well, when is enough enough? And for
Exactly.
those who feel alone, right?
Yeah. Remember what I said people used to say when I was in abusive relationships? When you've had enough, you'll get out.
Mm.
And I didn't like hearing that. And I'd always lie to myself as like, oh, it's getting better. It's getting better. And then in that cycle of violence, we would have an explosive situation. Then we'd go back to the honeymoon stage. Then I'm walking on eggshells again. Then we'd have an explosion or an incident happen. Back to the honeymoon stage. It just got to the point that I said I want off this merry-go-round.
Yeah. And I know it's exhausting for so many women or men. I mean, we say women, but it goes both ways because I know there are women who beat their husbands as well, and that's not cool at the same time. Um, it's especially hard too when you have kids and it's like you don't want to break the family apart, right? You don't want to break that family.
I
This,
mean, I've heard from children though that have been in relationships in marriages like that or their children, and they would say to me, "I don't know why my parents stayed together. They should have broke up a long time. Like they were doing it for us. It was worse." That's a falsehood. Parents thinking they're keeping their marriage together, unhappy, and that the kids don't know.
yeah, that is true.
I think that's another falsehood that we say to ourselves. We have to keep this together and we have to put on the show for the kids.
Yeah.
The kids are not dumb. They feel it. They don't like the unsettled feelings, the spirit in the home can't cover that up.
But why does the abusive man stay with the wife or spouse, or abusive wife stay with the husband that she's beating up? Why do they stay in that relationship?
The abusive person's why or the victim?
Why does the abusive person, I mean the person that beats up the spouse, why do they stay in that relationship?
Because
Why?
it feeds their ego for control. When we stay in relationships, we are feeding their ego, their control and power. Remember in the middle of the wheel when we talked about the control and power wheel?
Mhm.
We're feeding that monster by staying in the relationship. And it makes them feel good.
So unless they get help themselves,
They have
they
to
will
help
be able to
themselves.
recognize.
A victim cannot help the abuser.
Right. He has to get, or
He
she
has
has
to
to.
make the decision that it is not good for him. He sees and recognizes that what he's doing is wrong and then make the changes.
They don't know what
Nobody
love
else can
is.
do that but him.
Mm. So what we're saying is that abuser does not know what love is. They don't know what a good relationship is, because in their mind, what makes them feel good is, and what they think love is feeding their ego, feeding that
What they
power,
think love is control.
control.
You love me if I can control you. How many times have you heard in a relationship, and I've heard this is, if you would just do what I told you to do, this marriage would be great.
Yeah. And it goes back to the lady you were talking about who didn't know how to pay her bills, didn't know how to do grocery, never touched money,
Yeah.
and didn't even realize that she was in that relationship that was very abusive, in a sense of she had no control.
And then what happens to women that stay in relationships that are abused? Often comes suicide. Often comes, I'm just going to leave with the shirt on my back, leave my children because I got to get out of here. I can't take it anymore. The mental health issues.
And I wonder why my screen is frozen, but that is very true. Otherwise, you see this emotion on me.
Because it all becomes inward. It gets turned inward. And the abuser has made you feel like you are worthless. We start to believe it. We start doing our whole personality changes because we're following behind this person, trying to make them happy. And the target keeps moving. They don't He's upset because I didn't clean the house right. Okay, I'm going to do that. Okay, now the house is right. Oh, now he's upset because dinner wasn't cooked right. Oh, okay, now I have to do the house. Now I got to cook dinner this way. Oh my gosh, now he's upset with me because of the way I dress. Okay, now I have to do this. Then you lose yourself. Then you wake up one day and say, who the hell am I? Looking in the
Yeah,
mirror. I don't even know what color I like. I don't even know what my favorite meal is because I've been trying to please somebody else, to be everything they wanted me to be.
that is true.
And then oftentimes women turn on themselves and suicide. If you see in the news a woman that kills her children and tries to kill herself, she is at her wit's end. There was no other option in her mind. She couldn't leave her children. And if she couldn't be there for her children, she was going to take them with her.
Yeah, that is true.
You just get to the end of your rope.
And
I mean,
it's
I know
time to go.
in a couple of marriages I've had that were abusive, I was going to kill. I had a gun to his head. He was sleeping, had a gun to his head. And I remember calling my dad and saying to him, well, one of us is going to leave this house in a body bag and the other one's probably going to go to prison. And my dad said, leave the house right now, Susie. It's not worth it. I said, no, it's worth it right now. I'm going to put a bullet through his head right now
Wow.
because we get emotionally, we are at our wits' end. We don't feel like we have any other options. And then we take things into our own hands because of the abuse and kill somebody. We get rid of it ourselves, of the problem. And then we go to prison.
And it's not worth it. It's worth to just. So what did he do to
What
persuade
happens
you?
to your children when you do that?
Huh?
You think about what happens to the children.
Yeah.
You go to prison, their father is dead, and the children then what? Yeah, it's a very complicated, again, I think talking about the 8 areas of what the power and control wheel looks like, and then talking about the cycle of violence. Those three things. We're in the honeymoon stage, very happy. Then in instant you start feeling like you're walking on eggshells. Then you have a blow up and there's an incident, physically, of altercation of some kind, and we go back to the honeymoon stage.
Hmm.
So there's the power and control wheel of the things that we talked about, how um, abusers use these items against us or to control us. That's what they're trying to do. When these things right here don't work, when these things stop working, normally is when the physical abuse comes in. But if
And
you
that's
go
the one
to
that we
the,
talked about.
yep, right here is the cycle of violence. Those are the three areas: tension building, acute explosion, and honeymoon.
Mm.
And we stay on that or on that merry-go-round until we decide to get off of it and stop.
Well, Susie, we are at the end of our podcast, and I feel like there's just so much to talk about, and but
I mean, I
you
can
know,
come back next month if you still want me to do that. We can do monthly. I do
yes.
want to say that April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month,
Hmm.
um, and sexual assault is a huge issue in in our community, and definitely something that we really don't talk about. But incest is a problem in our community,
Yes.
and at some point, I hope that we can address that. As we've been doing this work for a very long time, um, it is definitely something. The trauma, the suicide, the alcohol, the drug abuse, the cutting, that all comes because, again, silence and turning all of that inwards instead
I,
of being able to have somebody to talk to about. So I always appreciate being on your show, and I hope that people are educated and um, know that they can always reach out if they have any questions or need resources. Um, but if anyone is on the visiting with us, joining us, and in a toxic relationship, I just want to say it's not your fault and that you're not broken. You don't need to prove your worth over and over, and you deserve to be loved and to feel safe every day, not just when somebody's in a good mood. And reach out to me if there's anything I can do.
sounds good. Thank you so much, Susie.
You're
Um,
welcome.
and we will have you again next month. What you just mentioned earlier, that is something that we really need to talk about because that is also a big issue in our Polynesian community that's also kept quiet. And so we really appreciate you being on here as always, Susie.
You're
And
very
so
welcome. And I'll
we
see
will,
you next month.
yes, we'll see you next month. And to everybody, to God be all the glory. And you all have a good night.